2016. Things are getting very, very exciting. The economy is still very, very exciting. So I would like everyone to have a look at this iView business channel and analyze what they're talking about. I think pretty much the cat is out of the bag, and a lot of people start talking about the economy. Even you start seeing on the main channel, on the TV channel, because we're getting very, very close to a collapse, and people are getting very, very, very nervous, and banks are getting nervous, CEOs are getting nervous, and at some point it's going to happen, and some are starting to say something. They're starting to sort of try to warn people what's happening and what's coming, to do with the house property collapse, to do with the leverage. I mean, the amount of money that people are borrowing to buy houses is absolutely ridiculous. And I'm just glad that the cat is out of the bag, and they now start talking in the main news, which is a good thing. So more people is aware of it. More people are open their eyes, and not just on YouTube, but they sort of getting used to the idea that something is not right, and collapse is just around the corner, and they better all be prepared. So I'll let you watch this iView channel. The business channel. It'll be about 20 minutes, and I want you to just have a look at it and and think for yourself, really. Thank you very much, guys. I'll be back soon.
Hello there. Coming up on the business. This time it really is different. Ex-Treasury Ken Henry's warning on the next financial shock. And rate expectations. Former Reserve Bank Governor Bernie Fraser talks to the business. The man who helped guide Australia through the global financial crisis relatively unscathed says the result of another GFC could be very different. Ken Henry was Treasury Secretary during the financial crisis and is now Chairman of National Australia Bank. He's told a conference in Sydney the government will again have to come to the rescue if there's another crisis, but has questioned whether it still has the financial firepower to be effective. Well, our chief reporter Andrew Robertson was there, and he joins me now in the studio. And Andrew, look, some blunt talk today from a man who's worked on both sides of the fence.
Well, he certainly has, Tiki. Ken Henry is used to being in the bunker, working with government. As you note, he's now on the outside as the chairman of a Big Four bank, giving warnings about government. Now, you'll recall that during the financial crisis, the Rudd government guaranteed both the loans and the deposits in the banking system thanks to its AAA credit rating and its low debt position. And that issue of moral hazard, or the risk to the public purse if a bank should collapse, has never really gone away, despite the banks being forced to hold more capital and the advent of things like bail-in bonds, which convert to equity if the bank is unable to pay the money back. These attempts to raise what's known as the total loss absorbing capacity of the banks, or TLAC, but Ken Henry says the conditions now are very different to 2008.
The question to which none of us knows the answer is whether a creditor who had already taken a haircut on a pre-existing loan, and that is what is being proposed in discussions on TLAC, whether such a creditor would front up to extend a new loan, even with a government guarantee. The other big question is whether the public sector balance sheet still has sufficient strength to be able to provide a credible guarantee. And all I'll say on this is that governments have generally not matched the improvement in the strength of bank balance sheets that has occurred since the crisis.
Exhibit A, of course, is the blowout in the government's budget deficit since the financial crisis.
Well, one of the biggest risks for the banking system was the heavy reliance on wholesale funding. Now, what did Ken Henry have to say about that?
Well, banks, of course, borrow tens of millions of dollars offshore to lend to their customers here in Australia, and Ken Henry says the risk from that remains a huge issue. And you'll recall during the global financial crisis, that money virtually dried up overnight. Now, following on from that, Dr. Henry told a revealing anecdote from his time at Treasury. He said that in 2006, Treasury virtually ignored a warning from the International Monetary Fund about the risks from that offshore borrowing.
We asked ourselves the question, all right, so that's a worry. In what circumstances could that worry cause a real problem for Australia. And we came up with one. And we thought it was so left field that there was no point worrying about it. And you know what it was? A meltdown of the global financial system.
Now, a man who's never short of a colourful quote, of course, is David Murray, who chaired the Financial Systems Inquiry. He was there today.
And he didn't disappoint, Tiki. Now, with all the scandals we've had in the financial services industry, the corporate regulator ASIC is proposing legislation to enforce culture with strong penalties if that legislation is breached. David Murray says that would be inefficient and uncompetitive because differences in culture between organisations are a selling point or a negative if it's all wrong. And he used some colourful language to make his feelings known.
There have been people in the world who've tried to enforce culture. Adolf Hitler comes to mind. You can't.
I'm not sure if ASIC would appreciate the comparison.
If you want people to be free, you cannot do that.
Well, you invoke Adolf Hitler, and of course it grabs headlines, but culture is such a huge issue now, and Greg Medcraft at ASIC is going to be standing strong, I'm sure. But once again, Ken Henry had something else to say on culture.
Well, he talked a lot about culture, but he felt that if a bank is totally focused on its customers' well-being, then culture will take care of itself. He agreed with David Murray that you can't have rules to enforce culture, but he made the point that if banks genuinely were focused only on their customers' well-being, they wouldn't need to be regulated because their values and ideals would line up with the regulators.
Strong opinions by health leaders. This is Wealth Leaders today. Andrew Robertson, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, Dickie.
Speaking of culture, ASIC has launched civil proceedings against Westpac over allegations concerning the bank bill swap rate, the second action in weeks against an Australian bank. The corporate cop is citing unconscionable conduct and market manipulation over Westpac's involvement in setting the bank bill swap reference rate, that's the primary interest rate benchmark, between 2010 and 2012. Westpac says it will vigorously defend the action being brought in the federal court in Melbourne and says it rejects any employee has acted unlawfully. ASIC filed a similar claim against ANZ last month, alleging multiple counts of market manipulation. Let's have a look at the markets now, and things are looking pretty glum today. The usual suspects did the damage: banks, miners and energy stocks. The oil price took another dip and is now less than $35 a barrel. Across Asia, it wasn't much better. Tokyo's Nikkei had a terrible day, with the yen at its strongest against the US dollar for 18 months, a blow for the country's exporters and the efforts of Abenomics to get the currency down. Speaking of currencies, the Australian dollar hit 76.3 US cents after the RBA left rates unchanged. Governor Glenn Stevens noting the Aussie dollar's strength is causing complications in the economy. And I spoke to Marcus Padley from Marcus Today from our Melbourne studio. And Marcus, yes, usual suspects doing the damage, but certainly look pretty indiscriminate today.
Well, it's across the board, Tiki, and there's this sort of recognition going on that the correction that we've had over the last year, where the market's down 18% since March last year, you've seen the energy sector down 53%, banks down 28%, resources down 46%. And today was very similar. You had the CBA down 2.3%, other banks similar, BHP down 3.5%, Woodside, Oil Search and Santos all down 4%. It's based in those sectors, basically resources and banks. And if you look at the industrial sector, it just highlights that the stock market is what we've always known it to be, which is a market where people have got to pick stocks. And interestingly today, on the current, it's going the wrong way, but the stocks that do well out of the lower currency, Amcor, Ansell, James Hardie, ResMed, all up today. The game remains the same. You've got to pick stocks, and some of the industrials have just ignored the market.
So the big stocks obviously move the market. What's going on underneath?
That is, everybody has changed everyone domestically has changed their focus to having a diversified portfolio, which has added no value in the last year because it holds the bank's resources into looking for safe growth stocks, stocks that are trending up, and all that has worked very well for the mid-cap growth stocks because a lot of the bigger money is funneled in. But the problem you've got is there are so many people in pension phase paying zero tax, love their franking credits, and they've been nailed because the banks have gone down so high. You can only imagine on 11, 12% yields, there is value there, but the market's certainly not believing it.
All right, no surprises from the RBA on interest rates, but some interesting lines in the accompanying statement, specifically around the Aussie dollar.
Yes, well, the one you said, which was the exchange rate could complicate the adjustment underway in the economy, is just a recognition that the currency is up 13% since the last RBA meeting, and they have to worry about that going on. So they're basically saying, I think, if it went to 80 cents, we might start changing these cut and paste statements we put out, but for now, we're not going to change anything, but just giving you a bit of a warning that there might be something.
All right, Marcus Padley, thank you very much, Steve, for all that.
My pleasure, Dickie.
Bernie Fraser is a former head of Australia's two key economic agencies, serving as Treasury Secretary, then Reserve Bank Governor during Labour's reign in the 1980s and 90s. He's currently chairing a review into the governance of non-profit super funds. On the day the RBA left rates on hold for a 10th consecutive month, he spoke with Elise Morgan.
Bernie Fraser, thanks so much for joining the program.
Thank you.
The Australian economy is undergoing a significant transition from the mining boom. Do we need lower interest rates to support the economy?
Well, we've got very low interest rates now. There's not much scope to reduce them further if we need to, and we might, I don't know, we might down the track. So we're not travelling too badly at this stage, so I'd be inclined to just keep what little firepower we've got left on the monetary policy side up the sleeve for the time being.
What do you think would spur the need for lower rates then?
And it's possible that the global economy remains pretty sluggish. They might have to call upon that 2 percentage points they've got up their sleeves and do something to lower rates. But
would low rates in Australia even work, or do we need to start looking at government policy more?
If there's a need to stimulate the economy, I would hope that fiscal policy would be supportive rather than contractionary. And everybody talks about the wisdom of doing something on infrastructure, social and economic infrastructure. And that's so obvious that I'm surprised that more countries, more policymakers aren't actively doing something on that front.
Doesn't reducing debt and reducing the deficit then help to build a better Australia?
The present government talks about having to live within one's means. Well, that's nonsense, really. Government debt is it's under 20%. Federal government debt is under 20% of GDP. Household debt is about 20 times that, It's approaching 200% of GDP. Now, household sectors are not living within their means. The corporate sector is not living within their means.
So do you think that should be reined in? Wayne Byers, the head of APRA today, has raised concerns about the level of borrowing by households and also raising the flag that we need to be getting prepared for the potential next global financial crisis. Is this something that we need to be focusing on?
There is a need to focus on household debt and all sorts of debt when it gets to high levels. But the point I'm trying to make is that government debt, federal government debt, is not of a high level by any standard, really. And that's why it's sort of misguided to be focused on these economic concerns and passing up the opportunities to undertake improvements in infrastructure and in the provision of health and education services, because they're the things that can make for a better economy as for a better society.
Taking a look at some of the policies, so Labor has said to make the system fairer, they want to limit negative gearing to new houses and halve the capital gains tax concessions from midway through next year. Do you agree with that sort of policy?
Yeah, that's one of the easiest things that one can do. People talk about negative gearing as a new tax, and some people have even talked about it as a tax that's going to cause the economy to grind to a halt and for the stock market to crash. This is nonsense. These are concessions it's not a new tax, it's a reduction in concessions. The concessions aren't being wound out, they're being wound back. They're still going to be there, but most of the concessions go to well-off people, and they make it harder for people trying to get their first home. And it's fair on all those points to be doing something about it. So
the government looks to be backing away from talk that it had a couple of months ago of both personal and corporate tax cuts. Is this something that the economy needs?
no, not yet anyhow. What it needs at the moment is a fair way of raising revenue for necessary infrastructure and health and education services. I referred to the...
But doesn't an income tax cut boost consumption across the economy and therefore lift revenue?
Well, a cut in income tax doesn't, it reduces revenue, which makes it harder to fund those infrastructure and service things that are required, in my view, and the important ones are required. There's a lot of scope there to do away with things that aren't top priority, but even when...
And bracket creep is something that Scott Morrison has raised again and again as something that needs to be addressed. Do you think it's as urgent as he believes?
I don't believe so. In recent times, wages, as you know, haven't been increasing very much, so it's not as pressing as some say.
Bernie Fraser, thank you so much for joining the program.
Thank you.
Hello guys. So as you can see, what happened they start talking on the main channels, on the main news, about the importance of interest rates and pension dividends and banks. The banks starting to come a lot on the main news at the moment. The reason being is because in Europe they already start charging negative interest rates when you put your money in the bank. It used to be you put your money in the bank and you get interest rates. You put $100 in the bank and you get 6% on $100. So in 1 year you'll have $106. Now it's negative interest rates. I believe it's minus 4%, I think. So if you put $100 in the bank in 1 year, you live there for 1 year, you lose $4. So if we're talking about 100,000, you lose $40,000, right? Actually, you lose $4,000 if you leave 40,000 in the bank. So that's what the government is doing at the moment. They're trying to want to push people to keep their money in the bank, and that way they can control their money better instead of you pull your money out. So moving on to the next topic, I'm just surprised that they all start talking about it more recently. Even in Australia, they're talking about the house bubble, the level of risk on the house interest rates and negative gearing. This gentleman before, Bernie, didn't want to speculate much on the negative gearing, but the problem with negative gearing, like we all know, is that if they trying to abolish the negative gearing, is definitely going to be a mass of chaos for people that have been buying all those houses and expect the taxation services to pay them, give them tax back, because that's the all incentive with buying with negative gearing. So they're all trying to avoid that kind of thing because it would be absolutely catastrophic if they stop that. So I'm just happy that at least they're starting to talk more about it. It's not all undercover, all covered up. It's more talk about it so people are getting more informed. And if you invest and if you want to be successful, you need to be informed. You need to be prepared because this economy collapse is coming. Whether if we like it or not, and we're getting very, very close to a collapse. So I just wanted to leave my comments with you. I wanted you, if you could analyze my video channel, if you could analyze all my talkings, and if you have anything that might increase my knowledge, or please leave your comments on the bottom. I'm much appreciated if you could do that. And I don't want to take much longer on this. So today is the 7th of April. This recording was made 2 days ago. The Business Channel One, and they good inside the Business Channel One, and it's good that everyone can be informed. I much appreciate. Thank you guys, and I'll leave you in peace. Bye.